Imagine you're here, just minding your own business, trying to catch some fish, and all of a sudden you drag this out of the water. Well, that's what happened to an Indonesian fisherman, and let me tell you, it caused quite a stir because the object was identified as a Chinese undersea monitoring system. I have questions, and I'm sure so do you. That's why we contacted Jennifer Parker, an adjunct professor of practice at the University of Western Australia's Defence and Security Institute and a former naval officer.
So I think this device was used to understand what is happening in the underwater domain to allow China to effectively track uncrewed underwater vehicles and submarines that are transiting in the vicinity of the Lombok Strait.
The Chinese say nothing to see here. In the past, they have claimed that their underwater devices were being used for scientific research and civilian experimentation, and while that might be true, that's just one side of the story.
One of the things we know about China's strategy when it comes to their military is this concept of civil-military fusion, this relationship between civil industry, especially state-owned entities, and military industry. And so that capability allows them to have these devices that have dual use. The other point to note about this specific device is it has CSSC on the side of it, which is a Chinese state-owned corporation that we know is involved in this concept of what some people call the Great Undersea Wall of China.
The Great Undersea Wall of China, also known as the Transparent Oceans Strategy, is Beijing's multi-layered effort to generate underwater awareness. It stretches from satellites in space all the way down to sensors at the bottom of the ocean. The aim? Tracking crewed or uncrewed vessels roaming the waters.
Once a submarine is detected, it is much harder for them to protect themselves. So if a submarine is detected, then in the event of a conflict, it could be sunk. So having the understanding of where all these submarines are gives you the ability in the event of a conflict to destroy that submarine. So again, the best defense for a submarine is to remain undetected. Increasing your ability to detect things in the underwater domain through investment in these sonars, these uncrewed underwater vehicles and these buoys increases your ability to be able to destroy a submarine in the event of a conflict.
So underwater awareness can be a huge advantage, but it's one that is extremely difficult and costly to obtain.
I think that countries have always wanted to have underwater surveillance capabilities, but many countries it has been technologically and cost prohibitive. We are seeing now with, the democratization of some capabilities, including uncrewed underwater vehicles, countries being able to more easily access the underwater domain and sense what is happening. We are also seeing countries across the world investing increasingly in undersea capabilities. The Indo-Pacific has 75% of the world's submarines, and we're seeing countries investing more in submarines, whether that is Australia, whether that is Indonesia, whether that is South Korea, whether that is Japan, whether that is China. And we're seeing that because the underwater domain is seen as an area where it is harder to be detected and so therefore can provide both operational and strategic advantage. So we will be seeing increased focus on both capabilities that can operate in the underwater domain and capabilities that can detect things operating in the underwater domain. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a race, but it is going to be a focus of modern maritime and naval warfare.
So while the Chinese insist that there is no need for excessive interpretation or suspicion, their words, not mine, the find really is indicative of an underwater arms race in the Indo-Pacific. And China's key competitor here is, you guessed it, the United States.
Well, certainly in terms of the US's submarine capability, the US is thought to be world leading in terms of their ability of their submarines to escape detection. The reason is that US nuclear-powered submarines are thought to be some of the quietest in the world, and the way you detect things underwater is by listening for sound or by putting sound in the water and bouncing that back. So certainly the US is thought to be world leading. In terms of their ability to detect China's submarines, again, the US is thought to be one of the key nations, alongside, of course, their NATO partners that have invested in whether it be towed array capabilities, or other capabilities, seabed arrays, etc., that allow you to detect submarines. So in the public domain, it is thought that the US is world leading. But we should not underestimate China's capabilities, because the thing is, when it comes to underwater capability, whether that be submarines or your ability to detect submarines, no country really talks in the public domain about all of their capabilities. It's often held in the classified domain. We do get some insights, though, into China's capability when we see things like this buoy wash up off Indonesia.
This device was recovered from the Lombok Strait. That's between the islands of Bali and Lombok, an area popular with tourists and apparently one of great interest to the Chinese.
It is one of the key straits through the Indonesian archipelago where submarines can transit. Submarines can be limited in what straits they can transit because they need those straits to be deep enough for them to transit underwater. That's why the Lombok Strait is of critical interest. And if you think about both Chinese submarines trying to break out of the first island chain being a geographic definition of kind of the islands that go down from Japan, Taiwan through the Philippines and Indonesia, or submarines from other countries wanting to break in to the first island chain. The way you understand what is happening through those choke points is you have devices in place that allow you to track uncrewed underwater vehicles or submarines entering or leaving the first island chain.
Which brings us to Taiwan, the self-governed island that China claims as its own, where controlling what moves underwater could shape the outcome of any future conflict.
So China's ability to increasingly see what's happening in the underwater domain gives them ability to, if they were going to take military action against Taiwan, be able to detect, track, and potentially destroy any adversary submarines operating in that area.
Does that mean we're watching China gear up for submarine warfare with the US?
I don't think that this investment in undersea sensors is necessarily preparation for an eventual conflict. I think it's a factor of a couple of things. One, countries have always wanted to be able to see in the underwater domain, but the technology to do so is becoming increasingly accessible. I think, two, we see from China's perspective, China has invested heavily in its military, including its naval capability, but acknowledged that one of its disadvantages is how noisy its submarines have traditionally been regarded and its ability to detect submarines under the ocean. As China, of course, invests in its military capability, it's going to want to identify and deal with some of its gaps in capability. And so moving into understanding what is happening in the underwater domain makes sense from that perspective. I'm not sure it would be preparation for a conflict, but what it is a significant advantage in the event of a crisis or conflict to know what is moving through the underwater domain near your coast.
In the Indo-Pacific, that is dozens of submarines, and the race to sea without being seen is only intensifying. So next time you cast a line or go snorkeling, bear in mind you might not be the only one scanning what's below.